Hey, all, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today we have a great guest, Chef David Pietranczyk from Breville, Polyscience, and we're going to discuss how Polyscience was integral in developing sous vide. I'll be right back with Chef David Pietranczyk.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
Hey all, before we get on to the show, I want to talk to you for a second about Instacart. Instacart's a great service that allows you to do all your grocery shopping online, and they can get you your groceries in as fast as 1 hour. They connect you with personal shoppers in your area that know your markets, and they can get them from your favorite stores. They find all the great buys and smart suggestions for you online to save you money. They pick the freshest produce, and they check your eggs and make sure they're not cracked. Check them out, guys. Instacart is offering free delivery on your first order of over $35 in the link below. Check them out. And now, on to the show. Welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today we have a great guest. We have Chef David Pietranczyk from Breville Polyscience. David, go ahead and introduce yourself. Where are you from? What do you do?
I am I guess my title says I'm the product and marketing specialist with the company, but I do a lot more outside of that. I've been with the company for 7 years now, a little over 7 years. And basically my role focuses on anything related to product from parts, components, documentation about them, and then everything to applications, how to use it. I have a background as a chef. I cooked for 8 years in kitchens around Chicago, and anything related to product, usually in some way, shape, or form, goes through me. And then when it comes to marketing, it was kind of like a little bit of a snowball effect, how I fell into that side of our business. Yeah, as it relates still to product, I know everything pretty much there is to know about sous vide cooking and how to use it. And it kind of made me a prime candidate to sort of do those marketing tasks.
So you're from the Chicago area. Is that where you're born and raised, or that's just where you landed, or?
No, I've been here forever. Me and my wife almost relocated. So in 2014, Breville acquired Polyscience. Polyscience was in Niles, Illinois, which is a little place just north of Chicago. And I had the opportunity to relocate, but I just really love winter.
Yeah, I grew up in winter, and I can take it or leave it. I like going out and visiting snow. Like a lot of people do, they like to visit Florida and leave, but I like to visit snow and then be able to leave and come back to the nice warm house. So
yeah, I at one time I saw this meme, and it said something. It was that frozen face. I think it's Jack Nicholson or whatever. It's got the frozen face, and it says, "Why do I live somewhere my face hurts?" And
yeah.
That's the only time that I really regret it.
Yeah, the Shining Jack. Yeah, when he's in the ice maze, I got it.
Exactly.
So let's talk about your culinary training. So you are a chef, and you've been working for Polyscience for a while. But let's go back to how you first started in cooking. Was it something you liked to do when you were a kid, and you followed your mom around? I like to ask this question because I'm always interested in how people got into the culinary field.
Right. So where things went wrong. Okay. Let's see. I was cooking from a really young age. I was fat and I loved food. And I found out that if I made food, I could eat said food. And that was just the unlock. That was the cheat code. I was really big, and my friends would always, pick on me and tease me and stuff. And I couldn't keep up with them. They'd ride their bikes, run around this, that, or play sports. And I was not cut for that. I'm still not cut for most normal sports. I like cycling, I run, stuff like that now. But any football, baseball, forget it. I was like, I don't want to go outside. I don't want to play. And then my mom was kind of like, all right, well, if you're going to stay inside, you got to help me. And I got to get dinner on the table. So I would peel potatoes. I would crack eggs, all that kind of stuff, measure cups of flour, this, that, stuff you do with your kids. I just kind of always liked it. And then I was part of the generation where after school I would watch Essence of Emerald, or actually before that, before Essence of Emerald, I think it was maybe that was the original show, was Essence of Emerald, and like Boy Meets Grill with Bobby Flay, or I don't know, remember what the shows were called, but I watched them at the beginning of Food Network, and that was a really like formative time in my life. And I was like, hey, can I do that? My parents were like, yeah, people, like, you can make a career out of this, you can do that. So they kind of fostered it. And then it was kind of funny. My oldest brother, he went to CIA for like a semester, decided he hated it. He was working in a restaurant, small little neighborhood bistro, and was like, I make no money. I work ridiculous hours, and all of the not so great stuff about the industry. And my parents were like, you cannot do this. Absolutely, you cannot do this with your life. Look what happened to Michael. And I still wanted to. And so I made an agreement with them that I would go to what I refer to as normal school, normal college, for to get at least an associate's in something. And then I'm going to culinary school. And that's what I did. I got a degree in applied science. I thought for a brief period I might go into astrophysics. I was really good at calculus and lots of other obscure sciences, but it was really boring. Like, it came very, very easy to me. I got straight A's in all levels of calculus, and going up through differential equations, I was really good at that stuff. And there was no challenge. I decided to play with fire and knives. And I went to culinary school. I went to Kendall College in Chicago. And I started working at a restaurant called Butter. I think it's actually your second semester at Kendall. And I really like that, because there's other schools, other programs, like, let's say Le Cordon Bleu. And I don't know if it's still that way now, but when I was shopping around for my puppy mill, the way Le Cordon Bleu did it was that they waited until the end, and then you did your internship. And I was really glad that Kendall did it so early on, because the difference is you have this painted picture of wearing a toque and the white jacket, and you graduate from school and you're a chef, and then you get to the end of the program and then you realize, oh my God, the reality of this sucks. With Kendall, it was, okay, you realize really quickly the paint is stripped from the walls really quickly in that program, because you go right into your internship, and you decide really quickly if it's for you, if it's not for you. And then you don't kind of spend the money on the rest of the program. So I thought that Kendall, at least that was pretty honest about it. And I did enjoy it, and I pursued it for quite a while.
Yeah, I never went to culinary school, but I did work in the restaurant industry when I was young. I started, probably when I was 15, I started washing dishes. And then when I got old enough to be able to work in the kitchen for liability reasons, I went in to start cooking. Not any fancy, white tablecloth restaurant or anything, but, family restaurants, TGI Fridays, or, Denny's or Ranch House, stuff like that, where,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it was, pre-prepared stuff, but it was still, you still had to do a lot. And I kind of learned, from there, your knife skills and all that, and your basic stuff, nothing that you would learn in culinary school, but just enough to get by. But I learned right away that, especially in those type of restaurants, the hours are, ridiculous. The pay is not that good, and unless you're going to either own your own restaurant or go to culinary school to become a higher, thought about chef, that you're, banging your head against the wall. So I did it for about 6-7 years. And then, while I went to school part-time, and was able to get into the banking side. But I always loved the cooking part, and making things, myself, and experimenting and cooking. And that's kind of what I've done throughout the rest of my adult life. I mean, I cook my house here. I do all the cooking. My wife doesn't like to cook, so I like it that way. But I've always cooked, whether it was barbecue or, just in the regular kitchen. I've always loved to cook and experiment and stuff. So, but
Oh yeah.
like you said though, I mean, your brother found out it's not all what you see on TV.
No, definitely not. I mean, I did like it. There were things about it that I did like, and I went in the deep end pretty quickly. I had really high ambitions, which for me isn't uncharacteristic of myself. My wife will be the first to tell you I'm 0 to 110%, like really quickly. If there's something I like and I realize that I might have a passion for it, I go all in, and there's no other way around it. When I was thinking about where I wanted to work, in the library at school, we had a copy of the French Laundry Cookbook, and I was just like, "Oh my God, I this is the most amazing thing ever. I need to go work there. I need to do this. How do you get to do this?" So I started looking for like the best restaurants in Chicago. I learned what a Michelin star was, and then I said, "Okay, who in Chicago has Michelin stars?" And at that time, Michelin Guide wasn't in Chicago. But you turn up at that time the search turns up, Charlie Trotter's, Moto, which was around at the time, and these restaurants were open. I said, okay, well, I'm gonna go stage at every single one of them, and I'm gonna get a job at one of them. So I go knock the doors at all these places, stage at all these places, and then I find that there's this one guy in Chicago who had some press, who had previously worked at French Laundry, and I said, okay, I'm going to work for him. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm going there, and I did. And as fate should have it, as par for course for me, the day after I started, he was fired. so so I said, well, you know what? It's still amazing technique, amazing food here, whatever. There's amazing talent in the kitchen. All of the chefs that were there have gone on to do amazing things, and I'm still friends with them. And through those connections, I went through other Michelin restaurants and stuff. So I went in pretty deep, and that was probably, I mean, I got good experience and good fundamentals and good technique from all of that training, but I saw, the most intense side of the business. I mean, I saw at one of the places that I was working, it was silent. A guy took me out back to yell at me because I dropped a cutting board. Because he couldn't yell in the kitchen, so he took me out back. Like, I mean, just the most absurd stuff. I guess probably that over time, all that kind of stuff wore me down, and I just decided, I don't need to do this. I don't need to be a part of this. There's other things I can do. And eventually I just decided, it wasn't for me. There are other things too, but that was one of the factors in me getting out of the business.
Dealing with the egos of some of the executive chefs, I'm sure.
Well, not just that, but I did, and I don't want to sound terribly dreary about it. I did enjoy those years of my life and stuff like that, and I do look back on them fondly, for better or worse. But it's very kind of like a mentally abusive industry, right? So you've got, especially in the kitchens, like I said, like I was in, you're silent, you can't talk, you're a prisoner in your own thoughts all day long. You're racing against the clock. Most of the time your prep doesn't get done, and you're trying to bang it out during service, hoping somebody doesn't find out that you're secretly just like praying that someone doesn't order the one item which you have like 3 portions of for the night. It's really just it's a mess, nerve-wracking. And then so I just wasn't cut for that. I also wasn't fast. We can talk all about that, but I was never fast. I was very creative. One of the places that I worked, it was strictly my job to be a tournant, help where I needed to, whoever needed help, bail them out of the weeds, and then be creative, work on new dishes, because I was really great at that. So yeah, I was never really fast. I could taste food, I could season food, I was good at that. And I kind of worked my way up the ranks, worked through everything. I did pastry, I did garde-manger, fish station, grill station, everything. Expediting, I did everything. And I said, do I know anybody who wants to hand me $1 million to open a restaurant? Do not pass go. Do not collect your $1 million. Do something else with your life. Yeah. And yeah. I just decided I didn't have a way to make it happen.
Well, and restaurants are hard. Those, even if you're a famous chef, I mean, I've seen a lot of these, Food Network chefs open restaurants and that fail within a couple of years. So it's The restaurant business is hard, but like you said, at least you're still in the field. You're still using that culinary experience that you had and
Sure.
training in a different way. You don't always have to be an executive chef, for a super fancy restaurant or your own restaurant. You can, do things like you're doing, or a few others that I know, working for a company, developing, and training and putting together, content.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was really, and I've got plenty of thoughts on culinary school, but when I left, I had this very singular vision that, okay, it's time to go work in a restaurant. And that's it. There was one way this story ended, and that's you go work in a restaurant. And that's so not the case. There's a million things you could do. You could be a buyer for Whole Foods. You could be you could be a blogger, a food writer. You could be in a position where I am, where I'm working for a equipment manufacturer. You can work in content and creative. There's so many different avenues you could do. A friend of mine, shameless plug, Chris Spear, he has a podcast, or maybe it's not a podcast, a blog, Chefs Without Restaurants, and I kind of, for a long time, kind of felt like down on myself because through my job, I have so many connections with so many amazing chefs. So many of my friends are amazing chefs. I could name on my fingers and toes, I don't know, 100 Michelin stars, people that I know. And I'm like, well, where's my Michelin stars? And I was really upset at myself for a while that I didn't do it. I always felt like I didn't do it. But you don't have to. You don't have to, and that's fine. You can be a chef and not work in a restaurant. That is a thing.
Right. Well, and I've seen a lot of, guys that, worked in the, 5-star restaurants, and then they open up their own food truck and become very successful at that. Or, some other type of restaurant, whether, casual, sports bar, stuff like that, where doesn't always have to be, a white tablecloth dining. I know sometimes, some of the executive chefs can look down at that type of place, but I've seen a lot of guys do that. I mean, creativity is creativity, and if you can chase your dream and be creative, that's my whole thing. It's not it's so I can express myself and learn and constantly and teach and help.
There's also a point where food just needs to be delicious. I mean,
Right.
David Chang's whole series, Ugly Delicious, like that's a thing. Like food doesn't always have to be tweezed and shaped and cut at 90-degree angles, and there's a point where there's just, you make delicious food. And I can't tell you how many meals I've had where I went in really excited, very high expectation, and it was just not delicious. I've eaten at some 3 Michelin star restaurants where I paid a fair amount of my paycheck, and it was not good. Like so many times, it's more about ego and technique than the food itself, which is really sad. And not saying it's all bad. Like there are really awesome 3 Michelin star restaurants and so forth that I've had experiences with, but uh, so often they're just not tasty. And I'd rather make delicious food.
Exactly. I understand
Yeah.
that. I've done the same thing. I've gone to a super expensive restaurant and laid down a lot of money and just went, huh, I'd rather go to, some place that was half as much, but, a lot better food. So let's talk about your sous vide experience. How did you get involved in using sous vide? Did you use it when you were working in the restaurants, or was it something you just started kind of doing when you went to work for Polyscience? Or
No, I always had an interest in it. It was very avant-garde when I was in culinary school, and not a lot of restaurants were using it. Some were, it wasn't really talked about. They sure as hell didn't teach us it in school. As a matter of fact, I there was one teacher, and I won't name her name, but she was really great. She busted my ass. Like, whew. There were days I came home crying from her, a grown man crying from her class. Just like she broke me down. But she was great. I did learn a lot from her, and she was a little bit progressive, and her husband worked at a restaurant that was on that list of places. Hey, how do I connect the dot between here and French Laundry? Her husband was working at one of those restaurants, and I asked her a question about sous vide, and she kind of was just like, "We're not even going to talk about it. You don't need to know how to do that." Like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then when I went to go work at this restaurant, my first restaurant, Butter, they were cooking sous vide, and I didn't do much of it on my station. I worked with a vacuum sealer and I compressed some things, but I wasn't cooking at low temperatures. That wasn't something that I did, but we were doing it there, and I kind of had an interest in it. And then other restaurants that I worked at, we were cooking sous vide more and more as the technology developed. So more or less as Polyscience came out with new stuff, and it was more accessible for the places that I was working at, staging through, so forth.
Yeah, and it amazes me that I've talked to several chefs that have gone through culinary school, and even recently, even AJ Scheller, they didn't teach it a lot. When she was in culinary school, she learned it after the fact when she got working in the restaurants themselves, and then of course she hooked up with Crea, and that's where she's at now. But it just amazes me that until fairly recently, they never really taught it too much in the culinary school. I guess because it was still being developed, and it really wasn't, this old timey, French, method that's been around for years. It just wasn't something that was mainstream that they thought needed to be taught in culinary schools until pretty much just recently. I don't even know if they're teaching it now.
They do. We work with some culinary schools, or we worked closer with them in the past. Again, culinary schools, I could go all day on that topic, but we do work with some, and they are teaching it. It is being talked about. To what degree, I'm not entirely sure. AJ probably has a better handle on that subject, but they are a little bit now. Also, at the time when I was in school, there was a lot of regulation and misunderstanding, and that's when that whole fiasco involving Zakarian, I forget his.
It was in New York. Yeah, I know. They pretty much threw it all out of all the New York restaurants.
Exactly. When that erupted, that was when I was in school and such. And you couldn't even, I couldn't even bring, I said, well, why don't I, get one or borrow one from work and, bring it in and we can do something. Oh, no, we can't even have it here. And this thing. It's like, it was just crazy, all sorts of craziness.
So how did you get hooked up with Polyscience? How did that come about?
Total dumb luck. Let's see. I exited my last restaurant, and that's when I have my now wife, and I said, "Hey, I want to do something else. I can always go back to cooking, but I'm just going to take a break for a little bit. I like spending time with this woman." And my brother was taking some, just like weekend warrior classes at the local Sur La Table store, and he was learning knife skills and whatever, and he said, hey, they're looking for an instructor, why don't you apply? So I did, and I worked at Sur La Table for like a year and a half, teaching everything from knife skills, pasta. They have all these classes that you can go there, and that's where I learned, one, I like teaching people how to cook, two, I still like cooking, and three, that wasn't what I wanted to do forever. So I was online, and there was a Facebook post. Polyscience is looking for people to join the culinary team. That's all it said. And it said, please send your resume to HR at whatever the address was. And I didn't even have a resume. Because I cooked. You walk in the back door, you do a stage, you're good, boom, you're hired. That's how it goes. I didn't have a resume. And the same thing, actually, funny with Sur La Table, I didn't have a resume there either. I actually did a demo. And what's even more hilarious, or what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I can't think of the word, but I did a sous vide demo to get my job at Sur La Table. I cooked French toast sous vide, and I made a cocktail that was a little bit non-traditional, and that's how I got my job there. And so I applied to Polyscience. I made a resume that night, sent it in, and I didn't hear anything for like 6 months. And I said, okay, well, they don't, figures, they don't want me. And I forgot about it. One day out of the blue, they said, hey, are you interested? We have a position available. I said, hell yeah. So I went there, had an interview, and I was sure I completely bombed. Like, I was sure 100% that I had totally just like, there was no way. And I was such a huge fan of Polyscience. The HR manager, she had a Polyscience travel coffee mug on her desk, and I asked her if I could buy one because I'm like, there's no way she's gonna let that they're ever gonna have me back in this building. I'm a huge fan. I want the coffee mug. And she laughed hysterically and was like, I think you might have one someday. And so they sent me on my way. And I was on my way home from said interview, and they said, hey, when can you come back for another interview? I said, well, I'm halfway home. Would you like me to turn around? And I ended up going back the next day, and I met with the guy who's still my boss, and we just kind of hit it off. Talked nothing about food, just kind of hit it off together, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, I like to hear those kind of stories because it's something that you can fall into, and people think that you got to sometimes scratch your way and crawl your way to the top, and sometimes it's just dumb luck. You just stumble onto something, and then you figure out and go, hey, I really like doing this,
Mm-hmm.
And especially, like, I'm sure when you first started culinary school, you never thought you'd be working for an equipment manufacturer. You thought you were going to be, like you said, a chef at a restaurant, or, just working in a restaurant. So,
yeah.
And, but it always amazes me that there are so many different, career paths that you can take, in this industry. So,
Oh yeah, there's like two of my favorite examples. My buddy Scott over at Modernist Pantry. He was a chef. He got certified executive chef certification or whatever from from ACF, and then turns out now he's making content and recipe development for Modernist Pantry, who dabbles in not dabbles, but their competency is food additives, xanthan gum, gellan gum, foam magic, all of these things. And he's doing that. Or my buddy Jamie Simpson at the Chef's Garden in Ohio. This guy is training with the Bocuse d'Or team. He has more talent in his pinky than anybody I know. And he's working on a farm, more or less, Culinary Vegetable Institute. He did a project called 32 Textures of Blueberries, for the Blueberry Council. And his food is actually, he might have been an art culinaire, if I'm not mistaken. His food is absolutely beautiful, delicious, and the guy's working on a farm. I mean, there's so many different alternative paths.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break for an ad here, and when we come back, we're going to delve deep into Polyscience, because a lot of people out there might not really understand that Polyscience is one of the first innovators of sous vide, along with Dr. Gousseau. So we'll be right back with David from Polyscience. Hey all, I want to welcome again Inkbird as our sponsor for the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Inkbird has more than just barbecue thermometers and instant read thermometers that I've talked about before. Inkbird just came out with a Wi-Fi sous vide circulator that I've been using for a few weeks now that works pretty good. Has over 1,000 watts of power. Has an app that has many times and temps for meats and vegetables. Also has onboard times and temps for meats and vegetables. Runs really quiet. fits most regular sous vide containers that are the size of the Innovas. So check it out. Look below, there's a link. So check out the Inkbird Wi-Fi sous vide circulator in the description below. Back to our program. All right, we're back with David. Let's talk about Polyscience, because I'm sure some people have heard about Polyscience. Some people know who they are, but there's probably a lot of people who really don't know, because Polyscience is more of a commercial type their products are more commercial. They're aimed at the restaurants and chefs. They're not sold on the regular retail shelves.
Yeah. So Polyscience started in 1963 by Seton Preston. It was an analytical and industrial manufacturer. They did everything from Geiger counters to oscilloscopes and all sort of analytical devices is what they manufactured. They also had they also branched out into Preston Industries, where they had actually a magazine called Photo Techniques, because some of Polyscience's temperature control devices were being used to process and develop film, and so they fell into that. What else? Polyscience served a wide range of analytical and industrial laboratory. What's the word I'm looking for? Industries, and then it wasn't until 2005 that chef from Charlie Trotter's, Matthias Merges, picked up the phone and he said, "Hey, I want to get one of your immersion circulators." And what was hilariously serendipitous about this is that he contacted every single one of our competitors before us. We were the last on his list to call, and everybody told him he was nuts. So he calls Jalabo, Ika, Lauda, all of these people, big players in the laboratory world, Thomas Scientific, and they said, "You're mental, dude. Like we thought like brain tissue in these things. We do cancer research with these devices, and you want to cook fish? You're out of your mind." They hung up the phone on him, and this is not an exaggeration, and so the person who picked up the phone, her name is Karen. She's been with Polyscience forever and is still there. And she said, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but our president likes to cook. Let me put you through to him." So as fate should have it, Polyscience was just north of Chicago. Charlie Trotter's was in Chicago. Philip talks to Matthias and says, "I got no idea what you're talking about, but I like food. I'm on my way." So he heads down there with an immersion circulator, and they cook a piece of, I think it was sea bass or sea bream, something like that. And they knew they had something, and then it just kind of exploded out of that spark. You've got Wiley Dufresne, who was in New York at WD-50. He was going on Iron Chef America, and it was Battle Tilapia. And he says, "Hey, I got this idea. I think it's gonna one of your baths is gonna work." So what he did was he blended tilapia with transglutaminase, extruded it through a Japanese noodle press into a Polyscience bath, and it's set into a noodle. And he made tilapia udon. And the judges said that dish alone, he won the battle. After that, literally the phone started ringing off the hook, and we couldn't keep up with the demand. Chefs from everywhere were calling us. It was just this huge spark. And then Philip, at that time, he would go through all of the orders and all of that, especially during the birth of culinary, during this time. And he saw an order come in from the French laundry, and he knew, okay, what kind of laundry needs a circulator? So he Googles it, or I don't even know if you could Google things back then. I don't know, but he looks it up, right, and realizes that, oh, this is a prestigious restaurant, and so he contacts them and he says, "Hey, I'd like to stop by, deliver it, talk about it, whatever." So he meets Thomas. over there. And, it was just kind of this perfect storm of this guy heard, this guy heard, this guy heard, and this guy heard. And it's sort of funny. Philip likes to tell this one story about he got a call, and it was actually during the NRA show, National Restaurant Association show, of course, which is our biggest show of the year here in Chicago. And his phone rings. He doesn't recognize the number. And this guy says, "You don't know who I am. I'm actually a nobody, but my name is David Chang, and I got your name from my friend Wiley Dufresne, and I need one of your circulators." And that relationship developed and so forth. David Chang goes on to be, this amazing chef, so on and so forth. And then those things just kept happening. Like all these relationships just kept building. And that's kind of how we became who we are.
Yeah. And I've heard some of the stories too. I can't think of anything, recently that's changed the cooking world, as much as, sous vide has. And it's not just about the immersion circulator. That has a good, a big part of it because that's the way to control the temperature. But just the exact, temperature cooking is just, I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around it. But I know it's something a lot bigger than what the average person can see. The immersion circulators now are on the market, for, the cheap Chinese ones for like $50. They're not the best in the world, but it gets more people and, learning about sous vide is one of the things that I like. Not everybody can afford the commercial quality Polyscience. So, people buy the Innovas and the Jewels and stuff like that are geared more towards the everyday person. But
Right.
but I think sous vide is such a big, change to, the whole culinary world. I don't even think it's scratched the surface yet.
Yeah, so another shameless plug. We have this documentary. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/polyscience, and check out the sous vide revolution. It tells that story of Polyscience in much greater detail. And Dave Arnold, now of Existing Conditions in New York, but at the time he was at French Culinary Institute in New York. This is 15 years ago. He was there and he was working with sous vide, and he was one of the early adopters. He's in that story, and he says, great. Dave Arnold is one of the greatest minds in our industry, and he says it's one of the most important developments in cooking history in hundreds of years. We've just scratched the surface. The stuff that Bruno's team is working on, stuff that AJ is working on. Now so I'm asking you, did you have AJ on as a guest? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, she was on about a month and a half ago. Back in November she was on, I think.
Okay, so I'm sure she plugged cryo concentration. Did she?
Oh yeah, and I know they had done some of that too at the sous vide summit.
Yes, and like stuff like that. So they're taking sous vide a whole level beyond where we thought it could go. And so as an example, cryo concentration. And I bring this up because you talked about we've only scratched the surface of the capabilities of low temperature cooking. Though we'll use our blanket statement of low temperature cooking's been around forever. People burying stuff in the ground in a pit and letting it cook slowly over time, or hanging something over a fire and letting it roast slowly for hours. Low temperature cooking's been around for a long time in many forms. Eventually, we start wrapping these foods, banana leaves, larger leaves, so on, sacks and dirt and so forth. It's always kind of been there. But now, light years into the future, you've got AJ's team working on cryo concentration, where they're through almost like ice wine. The process is kind of like making ice wine, where you have a solution, you freeze it, you thaw it, you freeze it, you thaw it, and you remove unnecessary water and other things from it, concentrate the liquid, and then you concentrate other properties about about it, the salinity, the pH, the Brix, so on and so forth. And then you have these, we have a whole new culinary toolkit. As an example, cryoconcentrated milk. This one blew my mind. I was at Korea for a training on HACCP last year, and they did this tasting for me. Cryoconcentrated milk is ridiculous. They take this really high quality milk, freeze it, thaw it, cook it sous vide in all these myriad of ways, so on and so forth. And then you end up with this product that can be whipped like cream, is sweet like cream, has no added sugar, and it's heat stable. That's freaking awesome. Then you've got chickpea liquid. Okay, aquafaba. People have been doing stuff with aquafaba for a while now. It was really on trend for a while. But cryoconcentrated aquafaba has all those amazing properties, like times 10. And it's even more stable. Egg replacement, cocktail foaming replacement. What else? Cryoconcentrated mushroom stem juice. That stuff is amazing. It tastes like soy sauce, and literally it's just cryoconcentrated mushroom juice. Comes from stem trimmings that would otherwise be waste, is now a delicious culinary product that can be used as just, another arrow in the quiver. So what they're doing over there is years beyond. Or during my lunch there, they serve me, they bring this dish to me, and it's madeleines, and I love madeleines. For anybody that doesn't know what a madeleine is, it's basically like a little we'll refer to it as a cake that fits in your palm. Texture's kind of like a pound cake crust with a sponge cake, but they're best eaten hot and fresh. You make the batter, you bake them, they're delicious. They've got a short window of excellence. They serve me, they say, year-old madeleines. And immediately my mind was turned upside down. And I'm like, what do you mean year-old madeleines? And they said, we took this batter, we cook it sous vide to pasteurize the batter, we freeze it, and then we have madeleine batter that's stable for a year. And to me, I'm sitting there with my chef hat going, so you can tell me that I've now just removed a single mise en place item from my list for a year. That's like being a culinary wizard, So like, and they were actually really awesome. The madeleine was still great. It was awesome. It was still delicious. It was still as you'd expect it to be or want it to be. So the stuff that they're doing with sous vide is really remarkable.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I even though I'm usually talking to, the average everyday Joe who's just cooking in their own kitchen, trying to let them understand, because, usually it's somebody that just bought one, they saw somebody cook a steak with it, that they think you can only cook steak and egg bites, the whole Starbucks egg bites thing that creative solutions or culinary solutions put out there was just everybody goes to it. They come out, I have a big Facebook group, and of course they come in there, how do I make egg bites? That's all they think about. And it's like, you guys don't understand, that sous vide is a whole method of cooking. It's not just like an Instapot or a George Foreman grill. It's not, just another cooking appliance. It's a whole method. It can do so many other things. Not that you're going to use them, your everyday ordinary cooking and you're cooking for your family, but it can do so much more. And that's what I try to show people. It's not just for cooking a good steak or a good pork chop, although it can do that really well. There's so much more you can do, and you can mix it with other cooking methods, like I try to do with barbecue and grilling and all that.
Oh yeah, it's amazing with barbecue and grilling. Another, I'm just going to continue to plug my friends because that's the kind of guy I am.
Go right ahead.
Meathead Goldwyn. I met him at the Sous Vide Summit, and he's got an ebook that's coming out on the topic of sous vide barbecue, sous vide Q. And
Meathead's been on the podcast. I know we've talked about it. He's supposed to give me a copy of that before he goes live, but I haven't gotten it yet.
I don't think it's live yet. I just know that it was on the way. But just like you were saying, it complements other cooking methods. Barbecue, Jesus, sous vide fried chicken, amazing. Forget it. Sous vide fried chicken is the best fried chicken. There is. So we were talking about, other things that you can use it for. And you said steak and, the egg bites, this, that. Now, I don't mean to jump ahead, and we won't jump ahead, but just because I know it's on the docket here, Sous Vide Summit and talking about that, they asked me what I was going to talk about at Sous Vide Summit, and my presentation was called Sous Vide Beyond Steak and Eggs, because that's literally everything that anybody thinks about when they want to cook sous vide. And there's
Exactly.
100 million things beyond that you can do, but we won't jump into that because that's later. So yeah.
That's okay. We could talk about it. It's not set in stone. So, but yeah, well, since you brought it up, let's go ahead and talk about the Sous Vide Summit, because it was the first ever one. I've talked to about half the people that spoke there. Everyone I've talked to that went said it was amazing for a first time industry type event. And I had Chef Eric Villegas on, AJ, of course, Meathead, everybody that I've talked to just had a great time and loved it.
Yeah, it was a great time. It was a super great time. We get approached a lot. Polyscience, we were the first. We were the first to sell culinary circulators to chefs. We've got a little bit of clout. A lot of people approach us, and we get asked all the time to do events and so on and so forth. And even if there's times where we've got to turn good opportunities down because we can't do them all. We can't. And Jason we've known for a really long time, Jason Logsdon and Mike, but Jason I've known since I started at Polyscience. I remember him sending him, when our creative series was like brand new, sending him one for his blog and stuff like that. And I met him. Like I said, I've been with Polyscience like almost 8 years now. I met him back then. So I knew Jason. I've seen him at shows. I've talked to him. I've heard him say, for a couple of years, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Would you guys be interested? I said, look, when you got something on paper, send it my way. We'll talk about it. And, being its first, being such a closed audience, all these people are there because they know sous vide. They've already drank the Kool-Aid. They're interested in sous vide. They know what it is. It makes a lot of sense for us to be there. And it was the first one. Like, how could we not be there? Even just to celebrate sous vide, just to be there. And so we went, and we had an amazing time. Crea Cuisine Solutions, they had amazing presentations, amazing food. They were so generous in providing breakfast and a dinner and all of this for everyone. Great speakers. The one that you didn't mention was Scott Heimendinger. That guy knocked it out of the park. He's a gentleman. He's hilarious. And I had for those who don't know, Scott Heimendinger works with Modernist Cuisine now. He used to be the owner of Sancerre, now sadly defunct sous vide manufacturer. But Scott talked about the drink the Kool-Aid process of sous vide. Like, hey, have you heard about sous vide, or the evangelism of it? Hey, I don't know what sous vide is. I tried sous vide. My food came out amazing. Oh my God, I'm the best cook there ever is. I'm going to tell all my friends about it. I'm going to buy them one. None of them want to hear about it. One converts, and it's just this endless cycle of sous vide fanatics. And he gave a great talk as well. AJ and I did a professional session on advanced sous vide techniques. We also talked about traditional results versus sous vide. We cooked some lentils. We made hollandaise. We did all these things, and then I gave a presentation on sous vide beyond steak and eggs, where I led with lentils. And I can't tell you how many people in the audience turned their eyebrow up at me, where people said, what's your rock star food? And my answer was lentils. And I mean, like, literally everybody in the crowd was just like, okay, you have my attention. And that came from AJ. I have a great relationship with AJ and a great exchange of ideas and dialogue with her. and the team there. So I do a lot of presentations. I do a lot of demonstrations. I travel a lot, and I do all this stuff for Polyscience. And my show pony for a long time has been chicken thighs. I love them. Not only do I just love chicken thighs, they're probably my favorite protein. They turn out amazing sous vide, and they're kind of bulletproof. And I can finish them in a variety of ways. I can fry them if I've got access to a fryer. I can griddle them. I could retherm them. I could throw them on a grill. I could do whatever the heck I want with them. So they're a real good product that I can get a consistent result with, or I can adapt to whatever my situation is dictating. Because I have been to places where I showed up to do a demonstration and they don't even have a kitchen, or I can cook in someone's break room, but then I have to present in a boardroom and I can't sear anything. I've been in all sorts of situations. So anyway, for a long time, my show pony was chicken thighs. And I'm like, part of this is me having fun, and I am tired of cooking these things. So I said to AJ, I need an idea. I need a rock star food. Like, when you guys go do demonstrations somewhere, what do you do? And she said, lentils. And we talked about it. I tried them, and I'm like, oh my God. The texture of sous vide lentils is like eating fine caviar. Each one is like a perfect little sphere, and it pops when you eat it, and it's creamy in the middle. Sous vide lentils are amazing. And then, of course, we talked about fruits, vegetables, cocktail infusions, using it for pasteurization and all sorts of other things. But that was my talk there.
Well, I'm going to have to try some sous vide lentils, because I'm not a big lentil eater in the first place, but now you've piqued my interest in that. So
okay, so I'll give you because now that I've talked about this, I'm sure I'm going to get emails and Instagram messages and stuff like that. So because everyone's going to ask this, this happens all the time. So in regards to the lentils, I would urge you to use beluga lentils or poi lentils. So beluga lentils are black lentils. They kind of look like caviar, which is why they're called beluga lentils. Poi lentils kind of have a little bit of like a zebra striping on them, a little tiger striping on them, and they're green. Those ones are going to hold their shape up the best. Red lentils, brown lentils, yellow lentils, they're going to turn into basically dal, but it's a really nice dal. But try beluga lentils. Use a 1% salt solution, 2 parts water to 2 parts solution to 1 part lentils. So 1 gram of 1 gram of salt for every 100 grams of water, and then 100 grams of water for every 50 grams of lentils. I cook them at 90 for roughly 45 minutes, and they have a really, really beautiful texture.
94 Celsius, right?
Yeah, use 90. No, 90.
90 Celsius.
That's right.
A lot of my people still go by Fahrenheit, so.
And I'll just talk about that briefly. So Fahrenheit is a totally acceptable temperature scale. The reason I started using Celsius, and I think it will help people as they're learning to cook sous vide, which is why I still preach it. Things happen at nice round numbers: 55, 50, 64, 73, 83, 85, 90. Things happen at nice round numbers. I like round numbers. Also, when I was learning to cook sous vide, I was like, how do things happen? Well, or what temperatures do things happen at? And I learned from Heston Blumenthal. 45 is blue, 50 is rare, 55 is mid-rare, 60 is medium well, so on and so forth. And then I started to use those temperatures in relation to other things that I knew. And then it was sort of this unlock where I knew where I was when I was using Celsius in regards to sous vide. And then I always just did it. And you know what? Every cooker, okay, I wouldn't say every cooker, but most cookers that are out there, it's so easy to just flip back and forth between the temperature units anyway. I know everything in Celsius. And then you can, if you read something in Celsius, then you just switch it over to Fahrenheit, and it usually keeps the temperature.
Well, since you brought up Heston Blumenthal, you guys have Polyscience has a product that's similar to their Heston Q, the Control Freak. It's like why don't you go ahead and talk about that? Because I've seen the Heston Q. It's kind of in a what do they call it? Oh, it just fell out of my head.
Induction?
Yeah, the induction burner, but it's with precise
Sure.
sous vide type temperatures, correct?
So the Heston Q is a little bit different. So Heston Q, and this is just my marketing pitch coming out. The Heston Q is a little bit different. Great product, great team. Actually, you had me for a second. That's Heston, Hestan, and that team of guys. Actually, some of them used to work for Polyscience, like long ago, back in the day. Still friends with them. Philip Tessier, amazing chef. Working with Boku Store. I don't know what restaurants he was at. I think Philip was at French Laundry, but Philip is widely accoladed or highly accoladed. Beyond that, what Heston Q does is it has special cookware that has temperature sensors in the cookware at different points, and then you cook along with an app step by step to get an exact result, and it'll control the heat based on what it's sensing in the pan. Control Freak, similar but much different, where you would say that that's like one of those espresso machines where you walk up to it and it foams your milk and makes you a cappuccino and all of that, and it's good, but it's not maybe what you're going to get from a barista quality coffee standpoint. The Control Freak is much more manual. It has very precise temperature. It has a temperature probe that goes through the glass and monitors temperature 60 times per second. And because that temperature probe goes directly through the glass, we can very accurately take the temperature of the cookware and then apply a PID algorithm to maintain that temperature indefinitely. So I could set a pan to 325, 326, 327, whatever I want, and I can hold that temperature indefinitely. Most induction cookers, they apply a load of heat, wattage, to get the pan up to a temperature. And what they'll do is they'll overshoot it and then let the pan cool, and then they'll keep pulsing a specific amount of wattage to keep it roughly at the same temperature. And that's what a microwave without an inverter does. Most microwaves, unless you got a really expensive microwave, that's how they operate as well. Sometimes you'll hear your microwave like kind of kick on, and then it'll kick off. The plate is still spinning inside the microwave, but you'll hear like, and then it'll stop, and it'll go back, and then it'll stop. That's because it's only applying the same amount of wattage for a specific amount of time. Now, if anybody's like me and they actually ever use the power settings in their microwave, and the only sort of control that you can do is sort of lower the wattage, but it's still going to put it out in bursts over the course of the cook time that you've defined. What the Control Freak does, that's different from that's different from other inductions, it comes up to the temperature that you set, and it just holds it indefinitely. There is no temperature fluctuation at all. So you can get an exact result like you would with sous vide cooking in dry cooking methods. So for an example, I cook chicken thighs sous vide, 74, 3 hours. I ice bath them, and then I set the cooker to 400 Fahrenheit, so just over 200 C, and I sear them on the skin side for 4 minutes, flip them to the other side for 1 minute, and they're done. It's the exact same result every single time. We do omelets, French omelet. If you go to our Instagram channel, it's one of our most liked posts ever. It has something ridiculous in terms of views and likes and all of that, but we did a French omelet. We do our omelets at 228 degrees Fahrenheit. We stir the curd until it's very bavous, and then we just let it sit for 1 minute, roll it, perfect French omelet every single time. It's always the exact same. So you get an exact result in dry pan cooking techniques. It also has a temperature probe that's integrated, which is super cool. It's the most misunderstood part of the entire product, but it's the most powerful part of the device. So it has this an auxiliary probe. You plug it in the front, and then it comes with this handy dandy pot clip. Slap that on the side of your pot. Probe goes into liquids. It can do water-based liquids like stock, tomato sauce, ramen broth, whatever it is, or oil for deep frying. And then you choose probe control, oil. And what that does is it runs a PID algorithm to maintain the temperature of the food itself. So now it's not running the cooker based on the temperature of the pan. It's running the unit based on the core temperature of the product that you're cooking, which is, we invented that, or we have a patent on that. We didn't invent that per se, but it's not just, the key difference here is it's not just taking the temperature and saying, okay, you're at 40 now, you're at 45 now. It's saying, okay, you want this broth to hold at 73 for 8 hours. It brings it up to 70, brings the liquid up to 73 and holds it indefinitely. The pan may be a different temperature to maintain that temperature within the pan. So it's driving it based on the temperature of the product itself.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That's for sure. And you guys also came out with the anti-griddle. That's a fun little toy I've seen on the Food Network a few times.
Yeah, the anti-griddle is really fun. It's a unidirectional flash freeze plate. So we make all sorts of things from canapes to cocktail garnishes, cold app garnishes. I actually had this idea that I'll share something similar that we've done with it in the past. If you ever seen an entremet cake, sometimes what they'll do is they'll take a tuile batter, colored batter, and they'll put down a stencil on a silpat, freeze it in the oven, and then you put a very flexible sponge cake batter over it once this pattern is set. And now you have this beautiful pattern, almost like a colored tile or something, or that you can wrap around your cake. Well, with the anti-griddle, I don't have to wait for it to freeze. It freezes in 10 seconds, and then I can go ahead and move on to my cake. If doing this freezing traditionally takes 30 minutes, 45 minutes for that batter to freeze. So it's got everything from garnish capabilities. We make customized for cocktails, actually posting, I don't know when this will post, but check our Instagram feed. We're doing, actually tomorrow's post is custom ice that we do for a Mai Tai. A Polynesian paralysis. I'm in a tiki at the moment, so be it. But we make a cocktail ice, all sorts of cool stuff on the anti-griddle.
Cool. Well, it sounds like Polyscience is, they come out with some unique things, that's for sure. And I know sous vide was one of the big things that got them going in the culinary side. I know they probably still have a good size on the lab equipment and everything else, but I know that the sous vide, they've been really aggressive on that, and one of the companies that really helped establish sous vide in the mainstream for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've always kind of prided ourselves on really creating innovative tools that help chefs with their daily work, but also help them be creative. I mean, our other products, would include like the rotary evaporator. It's a low temperature still where you can separate flavor from aroma. I can use that to make a watermelon taste like a peach. I can make a banana smell like a pear. We have the Sonic Prep ultrasonic homogenizer. Can take olive oil and vinegar and create an emulsion that's thick like paint and doesn't separate for weeks with no emulsifiers. It operates purely with sound waves. We have a smoking gun where we use it to smoke everything from guacamole to cocktails to tartare without applying any heat. We've always thought about very innovative products, not just putting another button on a toaster.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I like. I like innovative companies. I like companies that think outside the box and try to solve problems. Even on the grilling, side, I mean, I gravitate towards the companies that are, creating new products and developing the products that they have and making them better and solving issues that people have. And it sounds that's what Polyscience is doing. And I really enjoy it. I want to thank you, David, for being on. Very, very informative. And I want to invite you on again. I'll probably meet you when I come out to the 2020 Sous Vide Summit out in San Francisco this year. Anything
Sure.
else you want to talk about before we close this up?
No, that should be it. Make sure to check out Sous Vide Revolution on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/polyscience. Check out our website, polyscienceculinaria.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Polyscience. We're posting a couple times a week. We've been doing a lot of cool giveaways with some awesome companies, Cambro. We've got one coming up with Korea in celebration of Sous Vide Day. All sorts of stuff going on. And on the sous vide side, we did unveil something at this year's sous vide summit. So we've got some stuff in the works that'll come to light pretty soon. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put all the links in the description of the podcast below, especially. But I want to thank you again for coming. Make sure you check them out, listeners. Check out Polyscience. I'll have all the links below. David, thanks again for coming, and join us again on the next Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Well, I want to thank David for coming on for Polyscience one more time. Make sure you check out the links below to the Polyscience website and their YouTube channel. Check them out. It was great to hear about some of the original sous vide developments. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We have a great Facebook page and Facebook group. There's a lot more interaction. Check out our YouTube channel, Fire and Water Cooking, and follow us on our Fire and Water Cooking website, fireandwater.com. And I'll see you again on the next Fire and Water Cooking Podcast.